Hey everyone, Cleo here, and today I'm going to be talking about everything that I've read so far in the month of June. Now, the month of June is a Whateverathon, which is a readathon hosted by Maddie from Book Browsing Blog, and so I pledged 10 books for that readathon, so let's see whether I've been able to keep up or not. So it is currently the 16th of June, so I'll be talking about one book as well that I finished this morning, so just after the midway point of the month. But hey, I think I'm still quite on track in order to finish at least my fixed TBR, and if I need to, change some of my reading plans in order to get to my pledge, then I'll just allow that. So, as for what I've read so far this month, I have to say I started the month of June off with a reading slump. So, I had already been struggling the final week of May to kind of keep up, to kind of catch up, because I really felt like I was behind on finishing the books that I had set out to read within that month. And so I was really kind of powering through reading because I felt like I needed to read, like I felt like I was behind on my goals. And that whole sort of like week, I was able to kind of push through and still get around to what I wanted to read, but I also already felt like I wasn't really getting a lot of enjoyment out of reading, but luckily most of that reading was also rereads. However, going into June, I still had that same sort of feeling of having to struggle to read, having a lot of other things that I wanted to do more than reading, which I also allowed myself to do. But so within that first week of the month of June, I basically put down a book because I said, like, I'm not in the right headspace to be reading it now. And I read a few other books, but I didn't enjoy them all too much. And I don't know whether, like, my reading mood impacted my enjoyment of these books or not. But so let's just dive into those. First up, I'm going to be quickly mentioning this one because there's really not a whole lot I can say about it. And that is a novella from Arcanum Unbounded. So I read Mistborn Secret History. So this is a novella that I read between Mistborn Era 1 and Mistborn Era 2, but in principle, the ideal place where you should be reading it basically is after having read Bands of Mourning, which I think is only the third one even in the Mistborn Era 2. Mistborn Secret History basically tells the story of Mistborn Era 1 anew, adding elements that you aren't aware of while reading Mistborn Era 1. As a consequence, you can read it after having finished Mistborn Era 1 because it will only spoil Mistborn Era 1 in that sense. However, it does mention that there are mild spoilers for Bands of Mourning in there. I did not pick up on them not having read Bands of Mourning yet, but there is a potential for there to be something that you will be spoiled for if you read it the way that I did. On another side, I might think that it might actually be preferable to read it at that point in time, because for me, having just finished my reread for Mistborn Era 1, this just felt like a rehash of Mistborn Era 1. I just felt like too much of that story was a repeat of what we already knew from Mistborn Era 1, and this novella didn't digress enough from Mistborn Era 1 for my enjoyment. I felt too much like I knew what was gonna come because I knew the revelations of Mistborn Era 1. And so, even though I enjoyed it to some extent, I also was quite let down with that one. The second book that I finished was In the Miso Soup by Ryu Murakami. So this is a book translated from the Japanese. It is a thriller, a mystery, and basically we are following our protagonist, who is this sort of like travel guide in Tokyo who basically offers these sort of like sex tours to tourists. And so he has been hired by an American tourist for 3 nights of exploring the Tokyo nightlife. Now, around the same time, there's also a brutal killer on the loose, and our protagonist starts to fear that perhaps the person who has hired him, perhaps this American tourist, is actually a killer. I don't really love mystery thrillers to begin with, so with that being said, this isn't my genre to start off with. I did enjoy the writing style and I was compelled throughout like the first half of it. However, the way in which the story evolved later on didn't really satisfy what I wanted in this story, or didn't satisfy, the sort of elements to the story thus far that had been gripping me, and so I kind of lost interest with it towards the ending, and I didn't like the way that the story rounded off. Having said that, I don't really like mystery thriller all that much, and not having really fully fallen in love with this one, this is probably also the one and only time that I'll be trying out Ryu Murakami's works. He is a famous Japanese author, but there are just so many other Japanese writers that I'm interested in trying out that I want to read more of, so it'll be a long time before I pick up another Ryu Murakami. I will definitely say that if you are somebody who likes mystery thriller, then definitely do give Ryu Murakami a go, because, you know, it's always fun to check out writing from different cultures, writing from different languages, because they often have a little bit of a different style, which can mean that they have nice surprises which means that they can offer nice surprises for readers who are used to reading within a certain market. Next up, I also finished This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal and Mahmoud and by Max Gladstone. This, unfortunately, is another one that kind of left me wanting more. It kind of left me being disappointed with the read, or not really having it fully satisfy my tastes. It is, of course, once again possible that that was due to my reading slump. However, I was kind of hoping that I would fall into that category of people who are confused by it but love it, but I fall into the category of people who were confused by it and didn't really get it and didn't really enjoy it at all. So in This Is How You Lose the Time War, the premise for it is very interesting. It's a novella that's told basically mainly through letters, and it is letters between two sort of like adversaries. You have blue and you have red, and they are both part of opposing teams. Now these opposing groups are from sort of like parallel futures. Basically, if our present evolves in a certain way, you end up with the future that red is a part of. If it evolves in a different way, you end up with the future that blue is a part of. And both of these groups are traveling back in time, trying to manipulate past events in order to have their future secured. So I thought that that was a very interesting concept. However, in terms of its execution, I didn't really believe in the love story to begin with. You know, I would have loved to did a little bit more if it wasn't really an enemies to lovers, but just like an enemies to begrudging friends to allies, for example. I didn't really believe the love story, I guess in part also because we only see it through letters. We never really see our adversaries meet up, for example, so it really just feels more like respect or admiration or something like that, rather than real attraction, real emotional attraction, because they never really meet. But so through the acts that they perform, they will slowly fall in love. But as I said, I didn't really vibe with that romance, or couldn't really believe that romance, or really feel that romance on my side. And then when it comes to that whole exploration of the strands of time, it needed more exploration. You never really fully understand what these two futures look like. You just have elements to it, elements that just confuse you, that intrigue you, but you never get the full deal on them. And that whole idea of the time travel also, to me, felt like a little bit hollow. Like, what's to prevent you from going back to a past event that has already been manipulated by one group and re-manipulating it? So it just felt a little bit hollow in that sense. And the one thing that I thought was really going for it was its language. It's told through a beautiful language. The prose is magnificent. However, the content wasn't there for me. So you can have really great packaging, but if the content isn't there, then I'm not going to enjoy it. So there were beautiful passages, and at the beginning I was completely ready to fall in love with it because of its beautiful prose. But as the story continued on, I just found myself becoming more and more indifferent, caring less and less about what was taking place within the story itself. Next up, I finished History of Fools by Emily Fridlund, and this is basically the book that got me out of the slump. This is the book in which everything started to turn around, in which I started to feel that sort of like sense of joy from reading, that sort of engagement with the text, that sort of feeling of wanting to continue on. And I was quite fierce in starting this one because this is literary fiction, thriller, mystery maybe. And so I was kind of fearsome because literary fiction, I love literary fiction, however, it can definitely be hit or miss, and it is definitely more slower paced, so I didn't really know whether that was going to cooperate very well with my reading slump. And at the same time, it was like literary fiction starting from a sort of like mystery thriller plotline, which, as I said, I don't really like mystery thriller all that much. But when it verges into literary fiction, that is when it can really work out for me. But so in History of Wolves by Ellie Fridlund, we are looking at this girl who is, I think she's still in high school, and she develops a sort of obsession with the people who have moved into the lake house across the lake from her. And so she starts to develop a relationship with them. She becomes a babysitter for their young boy. But from the get-go, there's this sort of element of mystery to the story. And we as a reader are offered these sort of like hints throughout that there at some point is going to be a trial taking place. And so we don't really know what goes down. That definitely becomes clear as we get through further along the novel. But we definitely have that sense of foreboding from the get-go. The story is very much about belonging, about wanting to belong, and about the lengths that one will go to or the lengths that one will overlook things in order to have that sense of belonging. As when we look at the nuclear family, and when we look at our protagonist and her family, we definitely feel like there isn't really a bond there, like there isn't that deep connection. There aren't really conversations taking place between them. There aren't these moments of connection between the family. And so we see her seeking that connection elsewhere. I really enjoyed it a whole lot. It does have trigger warnings. I cannot talk about those because of the mystery thriller elements. So if there are heavy triggers that you need to be aware of, I will make sure that they are in my Goodreads review for them, marked as spoilers. And then we're moving on to the final book that I finished at this point in time. So the book that I finished this morning, and that will be Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb. So I am continuing with the Farseer trilogy this month. I had read Assassin's Apprentice years ago, reread it last month, and now I finally read this one, and I really loved it. And loved it is saying a whole lot because I also hated it for a big part. I hated this reading experience. I wanted there to be hope. I wanted there to be a happy ending. I wanted things to work out, while at the same time already fearing that that was not gonna happen. Like, if you've seen other booktubers talk about Robin Hobb, then you know that they will often say that Robin Hobb breaks your heart, that there is no light in Fitz's life. And yeah, that is definitely the case here as well. So in the Farseer trilogy, we are starting the story of Fitzchivalry, who is the bastard son of the royal heir. Because of his bastard status and his royal blood, he is this perfect mix that allows for him to be trained to become an assassin. He has the access to certain events. He is enough of a prominent figure to get into certain places, while at the same time not having that burden of being such a public figure that people will pay too much attention to him. We definitely see that kind of shift a little bit within this book, as Fitz himself has grown up to be a lot more of a confident man, and the events at the end of the first book have definitely left him feeling more confident in himself and seeing him carry on a little bit more of a sort of like leadership role. And so he is kind of tackling with his circumstances, his situation, with reverting back to that sort of like bastard status, to that sort of like diminished power that his status as a bastard leaves him in. I'm not going to dive into anything when it comes to this plot, but there's definitely a character in here that I grew to hate throughout this book. I very much dislike characters who, you know, see things in their own way and aren't open to other interpretations. So they will hurt other people around them. They will trick and mislead people around them. However, when something bad is done to them, they have this sort of like sense like, well, how dare you do that to me? Whereas they are themselves doing that to people. So there's a character like this in this book, and I so hate this character. Aside from that, this character is also taking advantage of the absence of certain other people to get their way, to get what they want in life, and kind of manipulating the people in power to suit his needs as well. And you know, there's like a lot of times a lot of people aren't seeing what's actually happening, which is so frustrating to read. So it was a frustrating, angering, annoying experience a lot of the time, but at the same time, as you can tell, because of the strong emotions I had while reading it, it was also a great one. I will say, for those of you who are not really character-driven readers, this is definitely a character-driven plot. I think when it comes to Assassin's Apprentice is maybe like half of the page count, a little over half of the page count, but it takes place over so much more time than Royal Assassin does. So you can definitely imagine that we're spending a lot more time on everything that's taken place within Royal Assassin than we did in Assassin's Apprentice, which is perhaps also the reason why I love this one a lot more than Assassin's Apprentice. I thought Assassin's Apprentice was decent, I definitely enjoyed the book, but there definitely were parts of it, especially the ending, that I felt were a little bit rushed, and definitely I very much more enjoy this type of pacing, even though at times it can then feel like, you know, move along, I want to get to that resolution, you know, I want to see how this thing ends, I want to see us get to that event. However, if we were to rush that, I wouldn't like it, you know, it's just that sort of anticipation, that emotional investment that sometimes makes it frustrating to read a slower paced book. But a slower paced book for me as a character driven reader will always pay out more in terms of my emotional investment. So yeah, absolutely enjoyed it. I'm gonna have to kind of prevent myself from picking up Assassin's Quest. At the same time, I was just so ready to be done with this depressive state, with this depressing world, with this world in which everything was going wrong, that I need a little bit of a change of pace. But so yeah, we are midway through the month. I have read 5 books so far. As I said in the beginning, I have pledged 10. So we are midway through that in that sense, just over half of the month. But when it comes to my sort of like physical TBR, not really physical TBR, but when it comes to the 5 books that I set myself out at the beginning of the month, I am 3 out of 5 into that list, so I only have 2 more to read there. And when it comes to the physical page count, I'm also just over midway through that sort of fixed TBR that I put myself. So when it comes to the other books that I will need to read in order for me to get to my 10 book pledge, there definitely are books that I want to prioritize over others, but if I need to, I definitely do have some shorter options there that I can read instead in order to still get to my 10 books. So the 2 books that I still need to read off of my TBR are The Jasmine Throne by Tasha Suri. This one has been released in the meantime, so I now do have the physical copy of this. This is the longest one that is still on my official TBR. It is 540 pages long. And then the second one is Eleanor Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman, and so this is just under 400 pages. I do intend to read these 2 next week, so I will for the remainder of this week be picking up something else, and then we'll just have to see if I manage to finish these 2 the week after. I still have a few days left to finish another 2 books, and I do have a couple of shorter ones available to me if I need to. So yeah, we'll just have to see. I don't really foresee a problem with finishing my 5 book TBR, and actually also not with my 10 book pledge, because as I have been saying 20,000 times already at this point, I do have short options available to me. I think I have a manga as well that I can get to through script. If need be, I can get like a comic book through script, which is even shorter in length. So I will definitely get that pledge of 10 books down. There are just a couple of books that I prefer to do it with, and I'm not entirely sure I'll be able to do that anymore. But in any case, as I said, back in the reading mood, so I am definitely hoping that I'll be able to fly through books a little bit better now, as I am very much excited about reading again now. But so yeah, these were the books that I have finished already at this point in time. Definitely let me know down below if you've read any of these, what your thoughts were on them, and yeah, wish me luck for the second half of the month. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and see you guys for a future one. Bye!